There's a reason that the vast majority of working class Americans are voting for Donald Trump, and it's not cultural.
Well,
and
you know that's not true, right?
Of course it's true.
The vast majority? I mean, what is vast majority to you?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
On to something less serious, but hopefully entertaining. A couple of weeks ago, somebody on Twitter made the assertion that Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat, and that is why the left hates him, because he is the ghost of their pro-labor past come back to haunt them. So I said, wow, that is a statement. I have to talk to this person. So I extended the invitation. The person is Batya Ungar-Sargon, the opinion editor of Newsweek. She is the person that made that statement. I told her, welcome.
The opinion editor
The
of
opinion
Newsweek?
editor of Newsweek. Yep.
Wow.
Opinion editor of Newsweek. So I told her she's welcome to come on. Not expecting a reply because, like I said, opinion editor of Newsweek. Big fancy DC job. But she did reply, and she did come on. We recorded a conversation. She's not able to come on Saturdays. She is practicing Jewish. It observes the Sabbath. You know, that's all commendable. So we pre-taped a conversation, and this is that conversation where she, you know, attempts to defend the assertion that Donald Trump is a New Deal Democrat. Let's listen.
Wow.
So I have with me now Batya Ungar-Sargon, the opinion editor of Newsweek. She is talking to us today on the Valley Labor Report because of a tweet now from weeks ago, but we've been continuing a conversation in the DMs trying to make this happen, and I appreciate her patience with that. The tweet was about Donald Trump and the New Deal, and I don't have the tweet up right now, but it was more or less something to the effect of the reason that the left hates Donald Trump is he is a New Deal Democrat, and the pro-labor Democrats or Democrats pro-labor past come back to haunt them. And, you know, so as you can imagine, I thought that was a little bit bonkers. So I was interested in your you know, hearing you expand on that theory. And so as a way of beginning, can you just explain to me what the New Deal is? I think that's a good place to start.
You mean what it represents to me? I mean, I assume you're familiar with it. Yeah.
What it is. I'm familiar with it. What it is and what it means, you know, in your imagination and in this context and in popular, you know, all the relevant kind of stuff around the New Deal. Yeah.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is so rare that I get invited into left-wing spaces, even though I consider myself a woman of the left. And so this is like a huge deal for me. I'm so psyched to be here with you and very, very glad that you invited me on. It's also very rare that I read my mentions because people on the left often get triggered by what I say. And so I can't even but for some reason I saw yours. I think, I don't know what, it was in my maybe for you on Twitter, whatever. I was like so grateful that you said, if Batya wants to come on and defend this position, we would be happy to have her. To me, I mean, I'm not a historian. This is not an area, a subject expertise of mine, but to me, the New Deal represents a moment in which, you know, the government said, we can't just keep relying on the labor of the masses and using them up and throwing them away and treating them like garbage. Like, it's not okay for people to, you know, work and work and work and starve, you know, or work and work and work and not have dignity while we, you know, in the elites rely on their labor to survive. I mean, to me, that's the major thing. I know that there was like a number of different ways in which the New Deal shook out. Or, you know, there was like the regulation piece, the unemployment piece, the big project piece of it, right? But in general, the idea was that the government had a responsibility to the workforce to protect their labor and their bodies and their selves as a form of protecting the national interest. I guess that's how I would define it. Would you consider that an accurate definition as someone who obviously thinks a lot about the New Deal?
Yes, I think so. I think that tracks really well with my understanding of the New Deal. And the only things that I would tack on to that would just be the centrality of unions and organized labor, and the way that, you know, one of the big the two bigger pieces of the New Deal, the National Industrial Recovery Act, NIRA, kind of as a predecessor to the Wagner Act, the National Labor Relations Act, both giving workers the ability to be the authors of our own stories, to like get out of the way, right? Because before the New Deal, every time it was over and over, what we would see is workers organizing, workers striking, workers picketing in front of their you know, the businesses, and the state coming in and brutally repressing this labor organizing, and in many cases murdering unionists and workers and the like. And so the shift that we saw in the New Deal era, in addition to the affirmative defense of workers in, you know, in the workplace, insofar as, you know, the Fair Labor Standards Act with overtime and minimum wages and things like this, was also the commitment to make the state in these situations where workers are taking initiative, making the state neutral, right? That I mean, even just having the state being a neutral party is huge, especially in a context where previously the state was murdering you, right? I mean, it's a huge shift, and that is why, you know, the UAW was able to organize the auto industry. You know, the Flint sit-down strike is really seen as kind of the kicking off of the organization of the auto industry. And the reason that one of the key reasons that the Flint sit-down strike was successful is that Michigan Governor Murphy sent in the National Guard to ensure that private security thugs did not go and murder them themselves, right? Ensuring that the people's lives are protected kind of over property, right? So you know, all of that, just to tack on to your, I think, good summation of the New Deal and what it means.
Right. So isn't this is already going so well? Like, we already have an agreement on like what the New Deal was, and that it was super good and super important. So I would say we're off to a really good start.
Yes, I think we're off to a good start, but I think the thing that, you know, the thing that's going to make the rest of the conversation all the more kind of befuddling to me is that we agree on what the New Deal is, and so now we apparently have incredibly divergent views of Donald Trump. And, you know, I'm from Alabama, right? So everybody in my family, I'm the only person in my family that did not vote for Donald Trump. Also,
wait, are they going to see this? Are your family members going to see this?
Some of them will. My uncle will, and him being my uncle may give you some indication of his politics, because it's always the uncles. But nevertheless, most of them probably will not. But, you know, okay. I'm the only person that did not vote for Donald Trump. For what it's worth, I'm also the only union member in the family. So, you know, is your family working class, or are they kind of in the professions? They're working class. Majority working class. Yeah. I mean, my dad's a machinist. My mom's a computer programmer. My uncle that I was referring to, he currently teaches, you know, he's worked in like construction and contracting, and he currently, because he's had multiple heart surgeries and all this stuff, he doesn't do that, and he teaches driving school now. His wife has been a bodybuilder, and she's kind of, you know, an interesting character. You know,
what is your analysis of their support of Trump? Do you just think that they are like how do you come down on that?
No, it's all cultural. It's all cultural. They're very Christian. Very religious, and so it's all about that. I mean, I've even talked to, you know, at different points, different members of my family, and they say that more or less, you know, the economic stuff I would agree more with, like a Bernie Sanders type, but he supports the gays, and so I can't have that. So, you know, they're very.
I mean, Trump's pretty pro-gay, though. I mean,
well, you know, the rest of his party is not. And, you know, just culturally, you know, they don't really follow politics, right? My family's not terribly political. Actually, they did not. My parents had never voted in my life until 2016, either 2016 or 2020. So it's all really the cultural stuff that has kind of activated them to even want to vote. And it's only one of my parents that's even voted. The other still hasn't, right? So So
And
yeah.
what is your understanding of why Sean O'Brien just gave $45,000, the head of the Teamsters Union? Why did he just give $45,000 to the RNC for the first time in 20 years? Like, what is your take on that?
I think there's a lot of stuff that I there are a lot of people that say a lot of different things, but I think the easiest thing to say, and the thing that makes the most sense, is that he believes that he sees where the winds are blowing. He believes that Biden is not going to win. He thinks that Trump is going to win, and so no need to make him mad. You want to do everything that we can to kind of at least, I was talking about keeping the state neutral. Like at the very least, we can keep Donald Trump neutral on the Teamsters. So I think that's the easiest thing to
You don't think the
attribute
fact that that Trump went there and actually was asking for the vote, like for their votes and for their endorsement, which again, historic for a Republican, you don't think that signifies I mean,
I
and
think
the
that
reason
signifies the strength of labor. That signifies the strength of labor. It does not signify anything about Donald Trump, because we can look at, Donald Trump's administration, actually, right? There was a UAW strike during his administration that we can look at his behavior, which was nothing. He didn't do anything. I was on the picket line in 2019 when the UAW went on strike. Donald Trump didn't do anything. And which is, I'm just a union member, right? But which is to say, also, Donald Trump did not pass the Butch-Lewis Act, shoring up billions of dollars in union pensions, which the Teamsters were the plurality beneficiary of. There was no other union in the country that benefited more from the Butch-Lewis Act than the Teamsters. There was an opportunity for Trump to pass that. He did not. Right? Biden did. It's just I don't talk about Biden a lot. I have a lot of criticisms of him, but just for what it's worth, right? The Butch-Lewis Act, huge deal for the Teamsters, and there was a chance for Trump to pass it. He didn't. And so I think that's a good transition. That's a good transition, actually.
Yeah.
Right? Donald Trump, a New Deal Democrat. Why? Why is that your perception of Donald Trump?
Okay. Well, because if we would define the New Deal, as we've sort of agreed on, as having this kind of taking an economy that was based on the labor of the working class, with no real sense of them as having sovereignty, autonomy, right? A sense of ownership over their destiny, right? That's kind of the definition we came up with together, right? And saying, actually, no, the economy should protect the labor of the working class. The economy should put the working class, the American working class, first. That to me was the Trumpian economic agenda writ large. I'm not going to defend every decision he made. Sure, I love to see a president on a picket line, I'm not going to defend every decision he made, but by and large, he came into an economy in which there was a handshake agreement between both parties that we should have free trade, right? I mean, NAFTA, and I'm sure you agree with me about this, that was Bill Clinton, right? That was a Democrat, right? And then Obama shows up and says those jobs aren't coming back, right? This was a handshake agreement between both parties that we should engage in free trade, right? That we should be in this relationship of dependency where China's eating our lunch, where we should be shipping off 5 million good paying working class jobs that secure a middle class life to build up the middle class of other countries, right? Both parties believed in this until Donald Trump showed up and said, we're not going to have free trade. We're going to have a trade war with China. And now we can both, I'm sure, agree on the weaknesses of his character in executing this. But the idea of reshoring manufacturing, the idea that our trade should reflect the interests of the American working class rather than the consumers, the elites, right? Like, this was an absolute revolution in the American economy that benefited the working class economically, certainly, spiritually, certainly, emotionally, made them feel. I mean, there's a reason that the vast majority of working class Americans are voting for Donald Trump, and it's not
Wrong.
It's not cultural.
Well,
and
that's not true.
Well, I don't. I mean, that's what
the vast majority of working class people are voting for Trump. I mean, that's factually not true, right?
Of course,
the
it's
vast
true.
majority. I mean, what does vast majority do you mean? And working class voter. It's just not
Vast
true.
majority means 67% of white working class people, the majority of Hispanic working class people, so 55%. Um, Now he's polling at 30% of black men. We don't know what he's going to get, but I mean, when he was polling at 8%, he got 18%. Now he's polling at 30%, so we'll see what he gets, right? Yeah, the majority of working class people, 60%, 60 to 70%, are voting for Donald Trump. And when you ask them why, they'll tell you why. They'll give you reasons, and those reasons are economic. The two main things are trade and immigration. And, you know, the AFL-CIO, look, I am totally pro-union. I think workers need representation. God bless you for what you do. But the unions did a 180 on immigration. I mean, it used to be the Democrats' position and the union's position that we need a strong border and very few immigrants to protect the wages and the labor of the working class. And the Democrats did a 180 on immigration when they stopped paying as much attention to the working class and started paying more and more attention to the college credentialed elites. And I'm sure you agree with me about a lot of this, by the way. Like, I'm sure we would find a lot of agreement here. But they did, and the AFL-CIO did a 180 on immigration. They went from being very anti-immigrant to protect working class wages to supporting mass migration, which is it's class warfare against the working class. And that is why people vote for Trump, because he showed up at a time when the Democrats were veering to the left and to a more permissive sense of immigration. And the Republicans, of course, love slave labor. And so they were always sort of, I mean, it was Reagan who gave amnesty to 3 million immigrants, right? Like, they love slave labor, right? And he showed up, and again, he took on both sides and said, we're not going to have an open border. We're not going to have, you know, millions of people coming here and undercutting American working class wages. And in that, he really, first of all, he delivered on that very strongly. But again, it's both economics and a sense of the sense in the working class. And this is for working class people who are Black, who are Hispanic, who are white, who vote for Democrats. There is a very strong feeling that immigrants are coming here and being given the kinds of opportunities that they no longer have, that they can no longer achieve, that they're sort of being granted the American dream when working class Americans can no longer achieve it. And those are real economic factors in which Trump turned the boat around. He's also, so on immigration, he's taken what was the Democrats' position on immigration, as Bernie Sanders, as recently as 2015, was calling open borders a Koch brothers proposal, right? So he took the Democrats' position on immigration. He took the Democrats' position on abortion, right? He supports up to 15 weeks. That was the Democrats' position until up through the 90s, right? He took the Democrats' position on, I would say he's avowedly pro-union. I mean, going out there and asking for the endorsement of a trade union. Did you ever think in your lifetime you would see a Republican presidential candidate go hat in hand to the Teamsters and say, I want your endorsement? I never thought I would see that. So, you know, that's what I meant by it. Like, culturally, he's very pro-gay. And when you talk to his supporters, they love that about him. They love that they think he's tolerant. They love seeing him courting black voters. He's just basically taken the centrist Democrat position, while the Democrats have veered very far to the left on immigration and on cultural issues, and then veered very far in the free market direction when it comes to corporations. Again, I'm sure you would agree with me in your criticisms of the Democrats being too pro-corporation, too pro-Silicon Valley, like they've sort of refocused at the top of the income. So that's kind of my case. Sorry. And I'm very curious to know if any of your family members would agree with me, but I just
Yes.
finished a book, which is coming out next week. And I traveled around the country. I interviewed about 100 working class people from all different industries, all political persuasions. And the thing that really shocked me was the stuff I'm saying, like, not all of them are going to vote for Trump, but all of them said to me, he put money in my pocket at the end of the day. That's undeniable. I heard this from like lesbian women, people you would not expect. Like almost every Black person I interviewed said that. Like just people you would expect to be, and people who often are voting for Democrats, but every single one of them said he put money in my pocket. I cannot deny that. I mean, I don't think working class people are wrong. Like, people living on a shoestring budget are not wrong about whose economy is better for them and when they were doing better. And they all feel that they were doing so much better, 2017, 2018, 2019. All right, floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that it seemed to me there were kind of three key pieces to that case that he's a New Deal Democrat, and that was on trade, immigration, and cultural stuff. As far as I'm concerned, what makes you a New Deal Democrat? I think we can set the cultural stuff to the side because we had,
Yes.
we literally had, segregationist Dixiecrats, from Alabama,
True.
right? And then we
True.
also had, New York libs, right, who were part of the New Deal coalition in the Democratic Party. And I don't think when people think of the New Deal, they don't really think about what the cultural opinions of the people who were spearheading the New Deal. That's just
True.
not really the kind of center. So, I'm happy to kind of cede some of that. Some of it I would disagree with, but I don't want to focus on it. The trade and immigration. I think that the AFL-CIO supported the USMCA, actually. And so, there's not a disagreement that it was better than NAFTA. And so, and I have kind of kept up with some of it, and there's been, it's not revolutionary, which I think when we're talking about the New Deal, I think we should be talking about something that really changes materially in a very significant way the status quo. But there were positive changes, and actually we've been seeing some independent union movements in Mexico come up that I have, been talking to people who have been reporting on this, and it's been very exciting. And part of that is a result of some of the new protections from the USMCA. So I'm, very grateful for that, and I think that the more unionism builds in Mexico, the better it'll be for American workers. The UAW is supporting independent union efforts in Mexico now as a part of their drive to organize the South, and even south of the border, they're supporting that, and I think that's great. But is that such a change that because there's a different we can say. On trade, was Donald Trump better than Obama or Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter or whoever? I'm happy to cede that. I'm happy to agree to that argument. But I think that when we're talking about is he a New Deal Democrat, I think that's a totally different ballgame. And that's actually one of the things that kind of that I kind of get raises my hackles when people talk about Joe Biden being the most pro-union president since FDR. And I think that is technically true, but it sounds a lot better than it actually is because the bar's been so low. And so I don't place a whole lot of value on that statement, and people saying it over and over, it kind of irritates me. But then on the immigration thing, again, it's just not a huge. It doesn't have the enormous impacts that people that some people will say that it does. And the reason that the AFL-CIO has come around on the immigration issue is because actually, and this is something that I prepared some stuff from Trump. Before Trump was in politics properly, he used undocumented Polish immigrants to build one of his towers. And then when they got a little bit of uppity and wanted to assert their rights as workers, he called INS, right? Clearly anti-worker, clearly not a New Deal Democrat thing to do. But that illustrates what the value of a restrictive immigration regime is. When you have a restrictive immigration regime, you have people because people are going to come into the country to a certain degree, and we can both agree, we can increase it and we can decrease it, sure, but there's going to be some people in here in the United States that are undocumented, and the big question, a huge question, is what is the state of their rights? And when the state of their rights is so low that you can use ICE as a club for the boss, then that is going to deteriorate the working conditions, obviously, of the undocumented immigrants, but native-born working people as well. And another Trump administration thing, in Mississippi, there was a raid on a poultry plant, arrested 600 people at their jobs, and deported hundreds of them. Totally a huge impact to the community. This was like in 2018 or 2019, obviously devastating for the community.
What happened at that plant?
Yes, I do. Do you know why that happened? It's because, and this was under the Trump administration, the workers' union had won a sexual harassment lawsuit against the bosses, and a couple of months later, ICE comes in there deporting a bunch of them. This was Donald Trump's ICE, and this was bosses
what
under Donald Trump.
But the New York Times went back to that plant 6 months later, and they had hired 600 local Black people who they were paying $18 an hour. That's what happens when you have an immigration raid, is vulnerable Americans who are struggling to achieve the American dream suddenly have job openings, because we know this from Barbara Jordan, the civil rights icon who Bill Clinton put her in charge of a commission on immigration in 1996. Her entire report is about how mass migration it's just simply complete devastation on the Black working class. It amounts to about a 40% wage decrease over the last 50 years. It's totally punishing, specifically to Black Americans who are overrepresented in the working classes, right? Like that is exactly what happened. I am so not worried about the rights of workers who came here illegally. I'm extremely worried about the rights of Black workers who can't achieve the American dream. And yes, I'm sorry, they're in tension with each other. They are.
Well, I think that actually when you have those people's rights being undermined, it makes it more difficult for Native workers to assert their rights as well. And I think that much is obvious. And then also, in the last, like I mentioned, the 2019 UAW strike, his biggest legislative accomplishment was a tax cut that primarily benefited wealthy people.
That's actually not true about the tax cut. If you look at the percent, I mean, I thought you might bring this up, so I wrote them down. But so people who made $15,000 to $50,000 a year got a 16 to 26% tax cut. People who made $50,000 to $100,000 got 15 to 17%. People who made $100,000 to $500,000 made 11 to 13%. Anyone over 500,000 got less than 9%, and people who made over $1 million got less than 6%. So it's that
right,
I know that people say this a lot.
No, when you're talking about the benefits, what is the dollar amount of the benefits? If you've got $2 trillion, I think is the number, 80% of that, even though you've got only 1% of the income going to 1% tax cut for millionaires' income, 80% of the $2 trillion went to the wealthy. And that's what people talk about.
But if you're looking at the absolute number, like the 1% pay more than 50% of the absolute number of taxes, right? We're always looking at the percentage. Yeah, sure, the absolute number, because but they're also paying the vast majority of the taxes that get paid.
So that was a political decision to spend $2 trillion and give 80% of that to the wealthy. I think that was a political decision, and I think that, we can disagree on the ramifications of that. The Mine Safety and Health Administration, he appointed a coal company executive who had been sent multiple pattern of violation notices when he was a coal company executive by OSHA, because, and those notices are only sent to companies that pose the greatest risk to health and safety of miners. Even Joe Manchin opposed it. The Department of Labor, he proposed Andrew Puzder, Hardy CEO, who had under his watch multiple stolen wage cases, health violations. Ultimately, Eugene Scalia was put in there. He rolled back expanded overtime rules, the NLRB. He appointed Peter Robb, who helped Reagan with PATCO.
Yeah,
he supported cutting Social Security and Medicare. He didn't support Butch Lewis.
His model was
attacked public sector unions. I think that's a huge list. And when you're talking about, especially when you're talking about the NLRB, a huge part of the New Deal was the NLRB, and he appointed somebody who specifically was in there to restrict workers' rights.
Yeah, I just don't think any of this stuff matters to working class people, which is why they're all voting for him. I mean, because this is the people he put in charge of regulation. His model was sort of the Scandinavian model, which is like low regulation, low corporate tax. Very low corporate tax, actually. It's lower than ours, right? And then couple that with trade and immigration policies that protect workers, and you're cooking with fire, right? Like that was kind of the model. I know that Democrats don't like that. They're sort of more into like the high regulation stuff, but clearly that is not how working class people judge which administration is better for them, because they have found that his was. I mean, this is not the stuff that matters to them. The stuff that matters to them, which they will, say in polling and everything, is, trade, immigration. I have to run, but this is so fun. And I think this is a really important conversation, and I'm very honored that you want to have it with me. And I would be very happy to come back if you think that you're getting anything out of this. I'm getting a lot out of it, and I hope your viewers and listeners will as well. But I think these are all really important questions.
Yep. No, appreciate you taking the time. Opinion editor of Newsweek, that's a big fancy publication. So thank you. I know you're busy. So appreciate your time. And yeah, happy to bring you on some other time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Talk soon.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
A lot in there, and I'm gonna have I've got a couple of things that I want to make sure that I add to it, but there's at least 2 points in there that I'm gonna have to, in the clip when Joe cuts this, we're gonna have like big flashing lights saying not true, not true, and one of those, probably, the most important point is the claim that the vast majority of working class people voted for Donald Trump. I don't know how she can believe this. And I sent her a message yesterday saying that I'm going to be saying these facts on the show after we play your clip. Happy to relay any response that you would have to them if you would like. It was, to be fair to her, like 4 p.m. when I sent that message, and the Sabbath would be beginning not too long after that. So probably didn't get to see it before she went offline. But it's just factually not true that the vast majority of working class people are voting for Donald Trump. Under 100, between workers with, or people with an income of less than $50,000 a year voted 55 to 45 in favor of Biden. People with an income between 50 and 100,000 voted even more in favor of Biden, 57 to 42. Only people 100,000 and over start breaking for Trump. And so I say them in that order because if you say the majority of people under 100,000 vote for Biden, then you might say, oh, well, that includes the non-wage earners. And so it's important to include 50,000 to 100,000 a year income because that includes that is not non-wage earners. Those are wage earners, and they are clearly breaking. You might even say the vast majority of them are breaking for Biden. Does that make him a New Deal Democrat? No, it does not. But it is to say that what she was saying there is just not true, and I don't know where she's getting that. 67% of working class whites. Maybe that's true. I don't know that to be true, but that might be true. I highly doubt it's true about the Latinos, but I just know if we're talking about class, which is kind of the primary thing when you're talking about the New Deal and you're having this conversation in that way, it is clear, it is obvious that is just not true. It is just not true that the working class is voting in vast majorities or even slim majorities for Donald Trump.
Right. To say that also ignores how many folks do not vote,
yes,
which is a huge number, right? Like, if an election has a 60% turnout, that's big.
Right.
Right. Well, who's in that 40% who doesn't vote? By and large, just working class
exactly.
people.
So when you combine the people who vote for Biden and then the people who don't vote at all, you've got something like, what would that be? 70-80% of people in the United States, and therefore probably something like 70-80-90% of the working class not voting for Trump?
Right. In Alabama, just take Alabama because I do know these numbers. Over 60% did not vote in November 2022. So Kay Ivey, our Republican governor, won in a landslide. But only about 25% of Alabama's voters actually showed up and put in her name. Okay?
Right.
25%. 1 out of 4. Right? So and people will say, oh, well, this is a Republican state, working people even support her. Well, hold on. You're skewing the numbers, right? And I think that is really important when we say, people like to talk about the silent majority. Richard Nixon, started that crap. The silent majority. The silent majority, by and large, are poor and working people who are not voting. And to say that a vast majority support Trump is just factually untrue.
And then, starting her some of the stuff that she said about immigration. Specifically, I cited the 2018 or 2019 raid on Mississippi poultry plants that deported some, 500-600 undocumented workers. She said that resulted in black folks in Mississippi making $18 an hour. Now, even that, it's not great. Poultry plants here in Decatur with a union contract, their starting wage, I think, is 20 or 21. So, even 18 an hour, not great. But I had not heard that. I was like, wow, really? Is that true? And then if that's true, what were they making before that? And, is that because she said that like that was some huge revelation. And so I went and looked and I found the New York Times piece that she was referring to. And that said they paid $11 an hour, the black folks who took the jobs after the undocumented workers left. And it does not reference it does not reference the wage prior to that, nor does it make any indication that the wage increased. Right? And so what we're left with is, again, going to have a big not true. It is not true that black workers got an $18 an hour job after, we threw a bunch of undocumented folks under the bus. But then, that leaves us with a much different picture, right? $11, that's like $4 over the minimum wage. Not very much at all, especially when you're talking about a job as difficult and dangerous as working in a poultry plant. And then you're looking at the situation where, these folks are not making any more than they would have made had the undocumented immigrants been there. And, bigger studies, even some of the studies that are sympathetic to the anti-immigrant argument, show that you see a localized decline in wages of 2, 3, or 4%. And those are and there are academics that have problems with those studies and say that they're not accurate, right? But we have broad, almost unanimous understanding that unionization creates an increase in wages of between 10 and 30%, depending on the industry. And that is not really disputed, right? That is by and large accepted by people across the spectrum, that unionization brings huge wage gains. And so we're left with a situation where maybe if we, throw a bunch of undocumented people under the bus, we can increase the wages of some local workers by 2%. Maybe. Alternatively, we could have solidarity with everybody and bring everybody's wages up 10, 20, 30%. And which is exactly why the AFL-CIO and its member unions have taken the stance on immigration that it has. We have shifted our position on immigration to a position of solidarity because we don't believe that we have to choose between solidarity and decent wages. We can, in fact, do both and have, because solidarity is what creates sustainable high wages and decent working conditions, not attacks on segments of the working class. And that is just borne out. The idea that we can sacrifice, we can sacrifice to the volcano of capitalism, throw people into the pit for the benefit of other people is just not really borne out by evidence and the lived experience of working people. And so that's an important thing to say. And I did find it, I thought it was a little gross or very gross when she said, I'm just not concerned about the rights of people who are here illegally. And it's like, even if you were to be a critic of undocumented immigration and you should say, we got to get control of this. It's like, well, once they're here, if you're committed to like a kind of, a human-centric worldview, you got to say we have to treat them right with due process and they need to be treated the same in the workforce as everybody else. That's the only way to kind of maintain a human-centered ethics and ethos and politics. And so before I conclude on that, was there anything specifically on the immigration stuff that you wanted to add there, Adam?
Yeah, I resent the fact that it's being associated with working class or, to be it's not a working class position to look down on other folks.
Right.
And, undocumented folks are not my enemy. Someone's documentation status does not make them any more or less human to me. Any more or less my brother or sister, my neighbor. I resent that being portrayed as some sort of working class ideology because I don't believe that's the case. I think, yes, that nationalism and xenophobia unfortunately is present in the working class, and it always has been, and that is in large part due to bosses and politicians and their mouthpieces in the media who, who spin these narratives and who get people spun up on this stuff. It's interesting. She kind of waved away some of the concerns that you had as like, oh, well, real workers don't actually care about that.
Right.
And it's like, well, first of all, I don't think that's true. Second of all, to the extent that that is true, it is because of people like you in the media who spend so much time and money and energy getting people spun up on issues that are less relevant than these issues you're waving away.
Right.
Arguing about all sorts of things that are detached from reality. And her views of Donald Trump are detached from reality.
Right. Yeah.
Some cultural rhetorical flourishes pandering to certain segments of the working class does not make you a populist.
Right.
Yes, just because some working class people watch TV and he's on TV a lot and he's a TV star and therefore has this little cult of personality. Okay. Doesn't in any way tangibly relate to what the New Deal was about.
Right.
In any way.
Exactly. Yeah. The New Deal was not a cultural flourish. There was a real material shift in the way that workers and employers related to one another. And
right.
So,
there was a shift in the balance of power.
Right.
And like you said, the state took a more neutral approach, though not entirely. FDR's record is not entirely clean when it comes to unions either. Let's not be, let's not forget that. I mean, we're still talking about a capitalist country. We're still talking about a capitalist system, and that is what that is. But as Notary put in the comments, she blamed undocumented workers for capitalism.
Right.
Right. The problems of capitalism being scapegoated onto poor, desperate folks.
Right.
Poor and desperate folks who just want to make a living, who just want to take care of their family. And yeah, I understand that some people think it's not right that people are coming here illegally. But I think in many cases, they are not really understanding what that's really about.
Right.
Do you think people are coming here I think there's this delusion out there that's being propagated by right-wing media that there's people can jump in line and they jump in line and then they get handed a silver platter by Biden and then they have a golden life paid by taxpayers.
Right.
That is just so detached from anything happening in reality. These are poor and desperate people scraping to survive, looking behind their shoulders every single day of their lives because they never know when they could be deported, when they could be, abused and exploited without consequence. I mean, it's cruel. And to see self-professed, people of faith, to see people of faith, use their faith to propagate such anti-human politics is really disgusting. And I think people of good conscience, whether they have faith or not, have to speak out against that. And we have to be very clear that immigrants are humans.
Mm-hmm.
They are our brothers and sisters, whether they came here legally or illegally, regardless of their documentation status. And this wonder, why are these people coming here?
Right.
Maybe, just maybe, it's not a good idea that some people are so desperate they're willing to trek thousands of miles, right, and deal with all the danger that comes with that just to show up in a country where they're not really wanted by a lot of people, where they're going to have to do the shittiest jobs with no protections, right? They're coming here to do that. You think they're doing that just for fun? You think they're doing that because Biden is giving them something? Get fucking real, people. I mean, seriously.
Right. And there's this, like you said, a total misunderstanding about kind of the conditions that they face when they get here, and also a misunderstanding about how exactly they got here, right? Because up until the almost the 20th century, there were no immigration laws. They're literally, actually literally was an open border. You got here and boom, you're
Right.
you're here and it's okay. And in many cases, in some cases, there's like, do you have a naturalization process? But there's absolutely, you were free to come here from wherever or from wherever in Europe. Specifically, and literally no immigration laws until 1882.
Yeah.
So so you literally came here when there was an open border. You listener, almost certainly, your ancestors came here when there was an open border, and now we want to close it and scapegoat all of these problems on other people.
Problems that the United States foreign policy is helping to create.
Right.
And I noticed Notary and William in the comments were going exactly where I was about to go with this, which is that in many cases these people are fleeing disasters that were created directly or indirectly by United States foreign policy.
Right.
Right. We go around the world overthrowing governments, propping up dictatorships, funding right-wing militias, letting multinational corporations just, run roughshod over these countries. We keep these countries corrupt and poor and in debt. We do everything we can to squash any freedom movements in these countries. God forbid they ever want to nationalize their oil or, take control of their own natural resources, right? And so these countries are kept in a status of chaos and exploitation and oppression. And naturally, some people make a decision that, hey, I don't really want to live in the middle of a civil war. I don't want to live in the middle of a gang war. Like, I'm going to take my chances and go to the great empire, right, who's really behind all this. If you can't beat them, join them, right? Maybe I'll be safer in the home country, in the home base of this empire. It's not a rational decision that these people are making, and it's just sad that they're being put in that position because no one should have to leave their home to have a decent life, right? I'm not pissed at somebody from Guatemala who shows up to Alabama trying to get a better life. I'm just sad for them they couldn't find that better life at home.
Yeah. And so to wrap up, like I said, I kind of dismissed the cultural stuff that she was talking about. I definitely disagree with a lot of her kind of understanding of Trump and the Trump phenomenon and where Trump voters, how they feel about his acceptance, to what degree it exists.
Yeah, I do not believe that evangelical Christians are supporting Trump because they think he's pro-gay.
That is maybe
stupidity.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's because she's a coastal elite living in New York or DC, and she doesn't know, or how.
Just because
that's crazy. That's
right. I mean,
crazy.
Yeah, of course, he's not going to go stand outside of a funeral with one of those god awful signs about gay people. I'm sure he's got gay people in his social circles, right? That's not unusual among bourgeois elites.
Right.
But come on now.
Yeah. But so set that aside. Then we're left with trade and immigration. I'm happy to kind of cede most of the point to her on trade. I think Trump probably was one of the better presidents on trade. But again, it was not a huge kind of landslide. We did not see an enormous shift because of his trade policies. We saw some incremental seeds of change that are, really coming to fruition now. They're starting to come to fruition now, like in Mexico with the independent union.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, it wasn't all very effective, and it wasn't all in the best interest of working people, whether it's here or elsewhere, right? I have no interest in a Cold War with China.
Right.
That does not do me any good, nor does it do the workers of China any good to have this Cold War between our two countries. We're very codependent countries, and there are problems in both, in the way in which we have this relationship in terms of the impact on working people in both countries. But yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in any sort of aggression towards China, and I don't think that is the way forward either.
And then on the immigration, we laid out all of our disagreements there. And so just to wrap up, I thought it was telling that when I got to the pieces of legislation and the regulatory bodies that were really at the center of the New Deal, like the National Labor Relations Board and the Department of Labor, charged with enforcing the Wagner Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act, which are really, when you think of the New Deal, if anybody thinks of pieces of legislation, those are the two pieces of legislation. And so when you just wave that away, say workers don't care about that, then look, we're making a different argument. You're making the argument that I think not well, but you're making the argument that Trump is good for workers. You are not making the you have now moved into a totally different terrain. You are no longer arguing that Trump is a New Deal Democrat. You are arguing that Trump is good for workers. Right. But, and those are different arguments, and we can have those different arguments. But to say Trump's a New Deal Democrat and yet as he is destroying the institutions that were created by the New Deal and are at the center of the New Deal, the Department of Labor, the National Labor Relations Board, Social Security is absurd to its core. It's absurd to its core.
It is. It's this trend of just saying things that are patently false and outrageous, but you say them anyway, right? You say them for attention, for clicks, for clout, to go viral, whatever the situation may be, but she's educated enough to know that that's BS.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
And it's but this is what so many folks traffic in, and what counts for politics these days is just dialogue, mostly on the internet, that is detached from reality. And that's a shame, because all of us working class people out here are struggling and are dealing with the failures of public policy. Years and years of policy failures by both parties, yes, but with one promising to make it even worse, frankly.
Right.
And so, it's just really sad when you have media that I think is making things worse. It's making the dialogue worse, the discourse worse, making people dumber, frankly. That to say New Deal Democrat and Trump, that does no one a service, right? That only misleads and confuses people. So, hey, I'm glad you had this conversation with her. I'm glad she was willing to come on the show. Not every, right-wing weirdo is willing to do that. So credit to her for doing that. But she should be ashamed of herself.
There you go. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.